is still a profoundly moving statement of our values. It has never been more relevant than it is now.
The room was closed before sunrise. Phones were left outside the door, and the family name was spoken like a warning. What began as a private estate meeting became the moment King Charles made a decision no one inside the family expected. The Sussex Trust Fund would no longer flow toward Harry and Meghan's household. Instead, it would be redirected toward William's children, quietly shifting money, power, and royal protection in one devastating stroke. Charles did not rush the file. He sat with it in front of him as though the paper had grown heavier than any crown he had ever worn. The Sussex Trust Fund, a private pool of family-linked money meant to support Harry and Meghan's branch, had once looked like a bridge. Now the king treated it like a risk. A private estate meeting means exactly that, a closed family discussion about property, money, and inheritance, arranged away from cameras, aides, and any voice that might soften the blow. He knew exactly what he was doing. The money would be redirected to Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, placing William's children at the center of the family's future. William received the news with a silence that did not feel like victory. The prince understood why his children mattered. George carried the shadow of the crown, Charlotte carried the strength of change, and Louis carried the innocence everyone wanted shielded. But he also understood what this meant for Harry. His brother's place had not simply been reduced. It had been measured and moved aside. William kept his face still. Yet the future king felt the ache beneath the decision. Protection for his own children had arrived wrapped in pain. Charles finally lifted the sealed estate note and read the phrase that changed the room: future safeguarding. The words sounded calm, but they landed like a verdict. Future safeguarding meant protecting the next generation before private conflict could threaten royal stability. The king understood exactly how cold that explanation would sound. Still, he signed, because the note contained a clause allowing redirection under extraordinary family circumstances. The monarch did not smile. He placed the pen down slowly, as if setting down hope between himself and his younger son. The first shock was not the money. It was the witness list. Camilla had been present. William had been present. And one senior estate advisor had watched Charles sign the instruction without flinching. Once those names became known, the decision stopped looking like paperwork and began looking like a family reckoning. At the heart of it were three children who had never asked to become symbols of the monarchy's future. George, Charlotte, and Louis were not even in the room. Yet their names carried more weight than anyone else's. Charles looked at William and understood this was not simply about inheritance. It was about who would be protected, who would be trusted, and who would be written into the next chapter. William felt the weight before a single signature touched the page. He knew why George mattered, why Charlotte mattered, why Louis mattered. They were not just children inside a famous family. They were the direct future of the crown, and that made their security, education, and public life more than private concerns. Charles had once treated the Sussex Trust as a bridge. The king had hoped it would keep Harry's family connected even through the distance, the interviews, the anger, and the years of public wounds. A trust fund is money set aside for specific people under controlled rules, and this one had once carried a quiet message. There was still a place, still a line, still a possible return. But now that same bridge had been turned away from Harry, and the monarch knew exactly how cruel that would feel. Catherine saw the conflict in William before anyone else did. She steadied the prince with a few quiet words before the meeting, not because he was weak, but because he understood too much. Protecting George, Charlotte, and Louis meant accepting a decision that would make Harry feel smaller inside the family. Catherine knew the children needed safety, but she also knew that safety had arrived with sorrow attached. Charles asked for the children's names to be read aloud before he signed. George, Charlotte, Louis. Each name changed the air in the room. The king did not ask for Harry's name to be repeated after the redirection clause was confirmed, and Camilla noticed it instantly. The queen consort kept her eyes on him, sensing that the silence around the younger son had become part of the decision itself. She understood the wound before anyone said it aloud. The money mattered, yes, but the meaning mattered more. This was no longer support being moved from one branch to another. This was the monarchy admitting which future it trusted most. But the trust did not change direction in a single morning. It had been moving toward this moment since one conversation nobody inside the palace ever forgot. Months before the estate meeting, There was a dinner that began politely and ended with a silence so sharp it stayed lodged inside palace walls. No announcement followed. No public statement admitted anything had happened. But those who were there remembered the exact moment Charles changed. Harry made one demand about royal money. William pushed back. And the king saw the future split in two. Harry arrived at Clarence House carrying more than frustration. He carried years of feeling pushed away, years of believing that every door opened easily for William but closed slowly for him. Clarence House, a royal residence in London often used for private family meetings, became that night the place where family finances, children's security, and future support were placed on the table. The dinner became known privately as the April Settlement Dinner, an attempt to settle whether the Sussex household would keep receiving estate-linked support from the family's wider financial structure. Charles listened as Harry pressed for guarantees. The Duke wanted written protection for his household, and he wanted it without palace control. That phrase changed everything. Palace control meant the family's internal rules, approvals, and limits over money, security, and public conduct. Harry wanted his support separated entirely from that system. The king looked pained, because he heard a son asking for help while also asking to stand beyond the family's reach. Harry felt cornered. Charles felt wounded. Neither man. William answered slowly, but the prince did not bend. He told Harry that the crown could not keep funding uncertainty while George, Charlotte, and Louis carried the weight of continuity. William knew his own children were already living under that shadow. Harry heard judgment in those words. The future king had meant responsibility. The brothers were speaking the same language, but their pain translated it differently. Charles set down his glass when Harry repeated the demand for protection outside palace control. The sound was small. The meaning was final. The king did not shout. He did not accuse. He simply ended the discussion, and that quiet ending became the point of no return. William watched his father's face change. Harry saw the door close before anyone even touched the handle. After the dinner, an estate advisor wrote the first version of the redirection clause and recorded the reasoning in a documented internal account. Future support could not become a weapon inside the family. Charles never revealed this publicly. He allowed silence to cover it. But silence did not erase it. The April settlement dinner was the spark. The confrontation that followed turned that spark into a family fire. Harry did not hear the decision from a headline. He heard it in a private call that left him standing still, one hand pressed against the table as if the floor had shifted beneath him. The message was simple and brutal. The trust had been redirected. His father had chosen William's children. For the first time, Harry understood that this was not distance anymore. This was separation. He listened as the palace communication was read in a careful, controlled voice that made every word feel colder. A controlled palace communication means an official private message prepared by royal staff to deliver sensitive family news without emotion or debate. This one carried no comfort. The estate instruction had been finalized. The trust was no longer meant for the Sussex household. The Duke heard the meaning beneath the language. His place had been reduced, and the family had done it before he could even argue. Meghan stood near him when the message arrived, and she understood the damage instantly. The Duchess did not treat it as a simple money matter, because money inside a royal family is never only money. It signals trust. It signals status. It signals whether someone is still protected by the inner circle or quietly placed outside it. Meghan told Harry this was not a private adjustment. She said it was a public humiliation waiting to happen, and the Duke knew she was right. Harry felt betrayed by Charles in a way that surprised even him. The king had disappointed him before, wounded him before, stayed silent before. But this felt different. This felt like a verdict on loyalty. Harry thought of the April settlement dinner, the warning in William's voice, and the moment his father set down the glass instead of reaching for him. The old pain came back sharper, because now it had a signature attached. Meghan pushed him to challenge it, to demand names, demand reasons, demand to know who had authorized the final move. But Harry hesitated, and that hesitation revealed the deeper wound. He feared the answer. He feared hearing that Charles had not been pressured, not misled, not cornered, but had chosen this with a clear mind. Harry demanded a direct conversation with William, and the brothers spoke without aids for the first time in months. This time, There was no one to soften the words. William told Harry the decision was about protecting the next generation, not humiliating him. He said George, Charlotte, and Louis carried a future that could not be exposed to family uncertainty. Harry heard protection. He also heard exclusion. William did not raise his voice. Harry did. The future king stayed controlled, because he knew every sentence could become another fracture. The Duke pressed him on whether he had asked for the trust to be redirected, and William answered with painful calm. He had accepted the responsibility, but the authority had come from their father. That answer did not cool Harry's anger. It redirected it. Power inside a monarchy rarely announces itself loudly. It appears in a file placed on a desk. A pen uncapped in silence. A monarch asking one final question before history moves. Charles had the authority. Authority did not make the choice easier. As the estate advisor explained the clause, the king stared at the page like it had become a mirror of every failure he could not undo. An estate clause is a written rule inside a family financial document explaining when money, property, or benefits can be changed, and this one gave the monarch room to act if the crown's long-term stability required it. Camilla watched Charles closely and saw something colder than anger. The queen consort saw exhaustion. She saw sadness. She saw a man who had spent years trying to keep a door open, only to decide that the door itself had become dangerous. The senior advisor confirmed in a documented estate account that the clause had not been activated because of one bad headline or one angry interview. It had been activated after the April settlement dinner shattered the remaining confidence inside the family. Future support, the account made clear, could not be left where it might one day be pulled into conflict. Charles read the private phrase written near the lower edge of the document. The line must be secured before the wound spreads. He repeated it almost as if testing whether the words belonged to him. He knew the line meant William's children, the direct future of the monarchy. He also knew the wound meant Harry, Meghan, and the pain nobody in the family had managed to heal. That sentence turned the decision from policy into confession. Camilla stayed silent as Charles signed. She realized he was not acting with triumph, and that made the moment worse. Anger would have been easier to understand. Revenge would have been easier to condemn. But this was final resolve dressed in sorrow, and that made it harder to fight. The ink had barely dried when the first emotional consequence appeared. Not in a statement, but on Camilla's face. When the door closed behind the advisors, she remained seated, staring at the empty chair where Charles had been moments earlier. The queen consort understood what others would not. This was not only a financial redirection. It was a father admitting that love had failed to keep the family whole. If the redirection became public, people would not see a technical estate decision. They would see Charles choosing one son's future over another son's place. Charles withdrew almost immediately after signing. The king refused lunch, asked for no calls, and requested time alone before speaking to William again. His silence frightened Camilla more than anger would have, because anger burns quickly, but regret stays. One aide noticed the Sussex file being moved from the active estate cabinet to a restricted archive drawer. A small movement, but it carried a brutal message. The Sussex matter was no longer being treated as active support. It was being treated as closed history with limited access. Catherine received her own warning quietly. She was told the children would be shielded from the details. Yet she immediately thought of George. That one day he might learn his name had been read aloud the day Harry's support was redirected. She wanted the children protected, but not hardened. Safe, but not raised on victory built from family loss. When William entered the room, Charles was no longer standing behind a desk. He was seated near the window, hands folded, looking older than the title he carried. No advisors. No Camilla. No Catherine. No papers between them. Only a father and a son facing the cost of a decision that protected 3 children while confirming the fracture of another. Charles had requested this meeting himself. He did not want a constitutional briefing. He wanted to explain, father to son, why he had made a painful choice, before the world twisted it into something simpler, colder, and easier to attack. William did not sit like a man who had won. The future king carried the decision heavily, because George, Charlotte, and Louis were now protected in a way that would be impossible to ignore. Still, he knew that security had arrived with a shadow. Charles told William, He had not redirected the trust to reward him. He had done it to protect the children from future instability, from arguments that could one day reach their schooling, their security, their public lives. The king admitted the April settlement dinner had changed him. That dinner convinced him estate support could become a weapon inside the family if it remained tied to unresolved anger. William listened without interrupting. He finally said he never wanted his children's safety to come at Harry's expense. He knew the Duke would feel replaced, and that thought troubled him more than he wanted to show. William promised Charles that George, Charlotte, and Louis would never be taught to celebrate what Harry had lost. They would be taught duty, not triumph. Protection, not pride. Continuity, not cruelty. Charles lowered his eyes when William said that. He heard mercy in his son's answer, and for a moment, the decision felt less like a wound and more like a burden being shared. Yet the monarch also knew the palace could not keep this quiet forever. Too many files had moved. Too many people had seen the witness list. Too many silences had become noticeable. William left the room carrying more than responsibility. He carried the knowledge that his children had been shielded by a decision that would deepen his brother's pain. Inside, the monarchy had chosen restraint. Outside, the public was about to turn one private decision into a national spectacle. By morning, the secret was no longer secret. Britain woke to a front page that felt less like news and more like a verdict. Sussex Trust sent to Wales children. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered in the rain, some defending Charles, others accusing him of cutting Harry out with surgical precision. The monarchy had gone public without saying a word. William saw the front page before the palace statement was even ready. He understood instantly that the story had escaped the quiet language of estate planning and entered the louder world of public judgment. Charles heard the first broadcast summary in silence. One broadcaster called it the clearest sign yet that the royal line is being secured around William's children, repeating the palace phrase future safeguarding again and again. The words made people wonder what danger had been serious enough to move the trust. The monarch knew that phrase would protect the decision, but it would not protect Harry from humiliation. Harry's supporters called it cruel. William's supporters called it necessary. The country split into two emotional camps, and both sides believed they were defending justice. For those standing with the Duke, the redirection felt like a father closing the last door on his younger son. For those standing with the future king, it felt like Charles finally protecting George, Charlotte, and Louis from years of family instability. The crown was no longer an idea. It was a line drawn through one family. Catherine watched the coverage quietly until Charlotte entered the room. She turned it off before her daughter could hear the words, because motherhood came before monarchy. In that moment, she knew Charlotte's name was now part of the public storm, and she hated that innocence had been pulled into adult conflict. William's photograph became the image of the day, the prince entering Windsor with a fixed expression, a picture that carried more meaning than any statement. Windsor, one of the royal family's most important residences, often tied to duty, history, and private decisions. His arrival there made the public believe something final had happened inside the family. He looked controlled, but not untouched. Strong, but not victorious. Charles did not answer the shouting. Harry did not receive comfort from the headlines. William did not celebrate the support. Catherine did not allow the children to become trophies in the argument. The crowd could argue. The papers could rage. But the final meaning of the decision belonged to the family left standing inside the palace walls. In the end, the trust fund was never only about money. It was about belief. Charles believed the crown had to survive the wounds of his own family. William believed his children had to be protected without being taught bitterness. Harry believed he had been pushed beyond the gate. And the monarchy, cold as it sometimes seemed, made its final choice. The future would be guarded before the past could break it. Charles carried the sorrow of that choice long after the papers were signed. The redirection had become a defining royal moment because it turned private family pain into a formal estate decision, one that told the world which branch would be protected first. It told Harry that love had not been enough to restore trust. It told William that duty had arrived with a wound attached. William accepted the burden with quiet resolve. He knew George, Charlotte, and Louis had emerged as the protected center of the monarchy's future, even without standing before the public. Their names represented continuity, the steady passing of royal duty from one generation to the next. Protection could still feel like loss. His children had been shielded, yes, but the shield had been forged from the fracture between brothers. Harry felt the loss in a way no statement could soften. The Duke was not erased, but his branch was no longer treated as central to the crown's future planning. For Harry, that truth cut deeper than the money. It meant the family had stopped planning around his return and started planning around his absence. Charles knew the final emotional truth. The April settlement dinner had ended the old hope, and the secret estate meeting had sealed the new reality. The king had once believed he could keep the bridge standing between both sons. The bridge had cracked under anger, fear, and mistrust. William inherited the duty to keep the next generation safe. Harry inherited the pain of being moved away from the center. No one walked away untouched. The monarchy chose continuity over reconciliation. It chose children over conflict. It chose duty over sentiment. That was the verdict, cold but clear. Charles made the choice. William accepted the burden. Harry felt the loss. And the crown stepped forward into a future that looked stronger from the outside and lonelier from within. If this story moved you, subscribe now, because the royal family's hardest decisions are still unfolding, and you don't want to miss what comes next.